Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Today's story is titled, The Billionaire Married a Single Mom to Win Custody, only to learn the child was his. Now let us return to our main character. A gray morning light poured through the high windows of a Manhattan courtroom. Every seat was taking the air thick with murmurs and camera clicks. At the defendant's table sat Julian Ward, 35, the sharp-suited billionaire behind Ward Holdings. His expression was calm, but the muscle in his jaw tightened as the judge reviewed the custody report for his late brother's son, Mr. Ward. The judge said, "You can provide financial stability, but the court is concerned about emotional support. The child needs a family environment, a home." Julian's attorney leaned close and whispered, "If we cannot show the court that you have a stable domestic life, we will lose this case." Julian exhaled slowly, the echo of the gavel filling his chest like thunder. For the first time in years, he felt cornered, not by business rivals, but by something he could not buy or negotiate: family. The judge's words replayed in his head as he left the courthouse, flashing lights from reporters chasing his steps. A home. The phrase followed him into the black limousine that waited outside. His driver asked back to the officer. Julian stared out at the city skyline. The towers of glass reflected his own reflection back at him, successful, untouchable, but utterly alone. "No," he said finally. "Take me to Riverside Hospital." 3 hours later, in the pediatric wing of Riverside, a young nurse named Lena Brooks was finishing her shift. Her scrubs were wrinkled, her eyes tired, but she smiled as she tied the laces of her son's small sneakers. 4-year-old Noah was coloring airplanes on a napkin, humming softly to himself. Lena worked double shifts to keep up with Noah's medical bills. The boy was due for heart surgery in 2 months, and every dollar mattered. She had learned to survive on instant coffee and hope. When the door opened behind her, she turned and froze. Julian Ward, in a charcoal suit, stood in the doorway. He looked out of place in the narrow hospital corridor, too polished, too composed for this world of bleach and beeping machines. "Mr. Ward," she asked, her voice unsure. He nodded once. "You took care of my nephew during his recovery last year." "Yes, he is a sweet kid. I was sorry to hear about your brother's passing." Julian's gaze softened for a brief second before he straightened his shoulders again. "I will get straight to the point, Miss Brooks. I need to get married. Immediately." Lena blinked, certain she had misheard. "I am sorry what I am fighting for custody of my brother's son," he continued, his tone even. "The court requires proof of family stability. I need a wife on paper. Someone reliable, someone the court will believe." "You want me to pretend to be your wife?" she said slowly. "Yes. In return, I will pay all of your son's medical expenses and provide financial security for 6 months. After that, we dissolve the marriage quietly. No harm done." Lena's pulse raced. The offer sounded impossible, unreal. She looked down at Noah, who was now asleep in the corner, his small chest rising and falling with the rhythm of a fragile heart. "I do not know what kind of man proposes that," she whispered, "but you are asking me to sell my name, my life for money." Julian's eyes darkened. "I am asking you to save 2 children, yours and mine." The silence stretched heavy with everything neither of them could say. Outside the window, rain began to fall over the city. Inside the contract, neither of them understood was already being written by fate itself. The rain outside the hospital had not stopped since that strange conversation. Lena sat in her small apartment that night, the contract still open on the kitchen table. The paper looked ordinary, typed lines, signatures waiting, but to her it felt like a storm in ink. Across the room, Noah slept with his stuffed bear tucked under one arm, his breathing shallow and even. She had counted every breath since his diagnosis. Julian Ward's words echoed in her mind. "I am asking you to save 2 children, yours and mine." He was a billionaire who could buy almost anything. Why choose her? Why this way? The thought made her heart race between fear and something she could not name. The next morning, Lena walked through Riverside Hospital's corridor, trying to focus on her patients. But every beep of a monitor reminded her that Noah's surgery was coming soon. The insurance statement in her bag showed a balance she could never afford. At lunch, she sat alone in the break room sipping cold coffee when her coworker Dana glanced at her phone. You have that look, Dana said softly, like you are standing at the edge of something big. Lena smiled faintly, more like the edge of a cliff. Across town, Julian stared out from the top floor of Ward Holdings. The city was waking full of life he no longer felt connected to. His assistant entered quietly. Sir, the press is still running the custody story. They are questioning your ability to provide emotional stability. Julian turned from the window, then we give them what they want to see. That evening, a black car stopped in front of Lena's building. The driver handed her an umbrella and a letter embossed with a Ward Holdings seal. Inside was a check to cover Noah's medical expenses and a message written in clean, decisive handwriting. Miss Brooks, I understand this is unconventional. I will respect whatever decision you make, but time is not on our side. If you agree, meet me tomorrow at 10 a.m. At my office, Julian Ward. Lena read the note 3 times before setting it down beside the untouched check. Pride and fear battled inside her. She thought about her late husband, about every night she had worked double shifts just to keep the lights on. She thought about Noah's tiny hand gripping hers in the ICU, whispering, "Mommy, will it hurt?" When morning came, she dressed simply a white blouse, jeans, and the courage she had left. At Ward Holdings, glass walls rose like mirrors around her, reflecting a world she did not belong to. The receptionist guided her to the top floor. Julian was waiting by the window, hands in his pockets, suit crisp as if sculpted from shadow. "You came," he said. "I have not said yes," she replied. He nodded once. "Then say what you need to say." Lena stepped forward. "You're asking me to marry you for convenience, to lie to a court, to a child, to everyone watching you." "Why me?" Julian's eyes met hers, steady, unreadable. "Because you are believable. Because when you speak, people listen. You care for my nephew when everyone else treated him like a task. You make people feel safe. The court will see that. I see that." The sincerity in his voice unsettled her more than arrogance ever could. She looked away out at the skyline that glittered like glass promises. "And my son," she asked quietly, "he will receive the best care money can buy. And when this is over, you will be free. Free." The word should have sounded comforting, but it did not. It felt like the opposite of what her heart wanted. Julian extended a folder toward her, reviewed the terms. 3 conditions: we maintain separate lives, attend public events together, and keep the arrangement confidential. 6 months. Lena's hand trembled slightly as she accepted the folder. "And after 6 months?" "After that," Julian said, "we both walk away with what we came for." For a long moment, neither spoke. Outside, the sound of rain softened against the glass as if the world was holding its breath. Finally, Lena closed the folder and met his gaze. "I will do it," she said, "but only if we both remember this is not real." Julian's expression did not change, but something in his eyes flickered, a shadow of something almost human. He extended his hand. "Agreed." As their hands touched, a brief silence filled the room, heavy, unexplainable. Somewhere beyond the city's noise, destiny took its first quiet step toward them. The wedding happened quietly on a Thursday morning, without flowers, without music, and without guests. Only the echo of rain on the courthouse steps and the sound of a pen scratching across paper marked the moment when Julian Ward and Lena Brooks became husband and wife. The officiant congratulated them politely, unaware that what had just been signed was not a promise of love, but a business agreement written in elegant ink. When it was done, Julian handed her a simple silver ring. "It is required for appearances," he said. His voice was calm, professional, as if he were closing a merger. Lena slipped it on the metal coat against her skin. Outside, the black car waited to take them to the penthouse that would now be called their shared home. As they drove through the busy streets of Manhattan, Lena looked out the window at the city she thought she knew. It felt suddenly unfamiliar, as if the skyline itself was watching her and whispering about her secret. At the entrance of Ward Tower, photographers had already gathered. Julian stepped out first, tall and composed, offering his arm like a practiced gentleman. "Just smile," he said softly. Lena forced a polite curve of her lips while flashes exploded around them. "Mr. Ward, is this a love story?" one reporter shouted. Julian paused only long enough to say, "It is a story of trust." Inside the elevator, the noise of the crowd faded away. The penthouse on the top floor was enormous glass walls, polished marble, and silence that hummed in her ears. Lena's small apartment could have fit inside the living room alone. A woman in a black suit approached, introducing herself as Mrs. Harrington, the household manager. "Mrs. "Ward, this way, please," she said with professional warmth that felt like a test. Lena blinked at the title, Mrs. Ward. It sounded strange, like she was borrowing someone else's name. Her new bedroom overlooked the city skyline. A king-size bed, crisp linen, and a closet full of dresses she did not remember owning. Everything had been arranged before her arrival. On the nightstand, a printed schedule detailed their upcoming public appearances, a charity gala, a board dinner, and a weekend retreat in the Hamptons. The illusion of a perfect marriage had already been built around her. Later that night, when Noah arrived with the nanny, Julian had hired the boy's face lit up at the sight of the giant apartment. "Mommy, this place looks like a castle," he shouted, running to the wide window. Julian watched from the hallway. "He likes it," he said quietly. Lena turned toward him, unsure whether to thank him or remind him that this was not real. "You did not have to do all this," she said. "I did," Julian replied simply. "Appearances matter." Noah looked up at him, clutching his toy airplane. "Are you rich?" he asked innocently. Julian almost smiled. Something like that. As days passed, their lives began to follow the rhythm of the contract. Breakfasts in silence, scheduled public outings, and polite smiles for cameras. In front of the world, they played the part of a perfect couple. Behind closed doors, they were strangers living parallel lives. Yet small cracks began to show in Julian's composure. He found himself watching Lena when she laughed with Noah or when she carefully folded the boy's tiny clothes. There was warmth in her that no wealth could imitate. One evening, while reviewing business reports in his study, Julian noticed a sketchbook left on the sofa. Inside were pencil drawings of Noah sleeping off the city skyline at dawn and of a man standing by a window. Him. Lena entered and froze when she saw him holding the book. "It helps me think," she said quickly. "I will take it." He handed it back gently. "You have talent," he said. "You see people the way they are, not the way they want to be seen." She looked at him for a moment, surprised by the softness in his tone. "You do not strike me as someone who believes in being seen," she said. Julian gave a faint smile that never reached his eyes. "In my world, visibility is a weapon." Later that night, Lena stood on the balcony watching the rain wash the city lights into streaks of gold. She turned the ring on her finger, feeling its weight. Somewhere inside this towering glass home, she and Julian were bound by a contract, but something invisible had begun to form, something neither of them could define. And as thunder rolled over Manhattan, the walls between duty and desire began to thin. Weeks passed, and the illusion of marriage became a routine of rehearsed gestures and polite distance. Yet the public believed every photograph, every smile. The headlines read, "Billionaire Julian Ward and his beautiful wife Lena bring hope back to the Ward legacy." Inside the penthouse, reality was quieter. Every morning, Lena prepared breakfast while Julian read financial reports at the dining table. Noah would crawl into a chair beside him, swinging his legs and asking endless questions about the world outside the window. Julian would always answer, never impatient, but with the careful tone of a man who had forgotten what it meant to speak to a child. One afternoon, Lena found him in the piano room, his hands hovering over the keys but never pressing them. The lid was open, dustless, as if waiting for something long denied. "You play?" she asked softly. "I used to," Julian said without looking up. "My mother insisted. I stopped after she died. The silence was easier." Lena sat on the nearby bench, watching his reflection on the polished surface. "Sometimes silence is the heaviest sound," she said. Julian's fingers finally pressed one note. It lingered in the air, trembling like a fragile confession. That evening, they had their first public event together, a charity gala hosted by Ward Holdings. Lena's gown shimmered like starlight, elegant yet understated. As they entered the ballroom, photographers lined the red carpet, capturing every glance between them. Julian leaned close and whispered, "Remember, tonight we are a perfect couple." "I will try not to ruin your image," she replied quietly. At the gala, executives and board members greeted them with forced warmth. Whispers followed Lena wherever she went. Curious eyes scanning the woman who had turned the city's most untouchable billionaire into a married man. During the dinner, an older investor leaned toward Julian. "Your wife has grace, Julian. She is unexpected." Julian raised his glass. "That she is." Across the table, Lena spoke kindly with a group of young interns about her time in nursing. Her laughter, light, unguarded, floated through the room and reached Julian like a sound he had forgotten existed. Halfway through the evening, a storm hit the city. The lights flickered once before the backup generators hummed to life. A tray slipped from a waiter's hand, glass shattering across the marble floor. The room tensed, but Lena stepped forward, steadying the young waiter. It is all right, she said, kneeling to help gather the shards. The crowd murmured, touched by her humility. Julian watched silently, pride rising in his chest. It was the first time he felt something that resembled admiration instead of strategy. Later, as the gala ended, reporters swarmed near the exit. "Mr. Ward, one photo before you leave," someone shouted. Julian looked at Lena, her hair slightly damp from the rain outside, her eyes bright under the flashes. He hesitated for a fraction of a second before pulling her close and pressing a gentle kiss on her cheek. The cameras went wild. Inside the car, silence settled again. Lena turned to him. "That was not in the script," she said. Julian looked out the window, raindrops sliding down the glass. "Neither was you." She blinked, uncertain how to respond. The hum of the city filled the space between them. At home, Noah was waiting with his babysitter. When Lena tucked him into bed, he whispered, "Mommy, Mr. Julian likes you." She smiled softly. "He likes order and quiet. I just happened to bring both." But when she returned to the living room, she found Julian standing by the window holding 2 cups of tea. "For the lady who saved the waiter's dignity tonight," he said. Lena accepted the cup, their fingers brushing for the briefest moment. The world outside was still soaked in stormlight, but inside the distance between them had shifted imperceptibly but undeniably. For the first time, Julian did not see their marriage as a contract. He saw a woman who brought warmth into the cold marble of his world, a woman who had started to rewrite the silence he once thought he deserved. And somewhere deep inside, though neither would admit it, the lines between performance and reality began to blur. The next weeks moved like scenes from a movie that both Julian and Lena had agreed to perform in, but neither could stop feeling. Their public appearances became smoother, their smiles more believable, their chemistry harder to disguise. Every newspaper headline called them New York's most admired couple. But behind the closed doors of the penthouse, something deeper began to stir. One morning, Lena woke early to find the piano room filled with soft music. Julian was there, his hands moving across the keys with quiet grace. It was the same melody he had refused to play before. She stood silently watching. When he noticed her, he stopped, embarrassed by his own vulnerability. "I thought you stopped playing," she said. "I did," he answered, his voice low. "But lately I cannot seem to stop hearing the music." Lena smiled faintly. "Then maybe it was never gone. Maybe you just forgot how to listen." From that day, something invisible shifted between them. They began to share breakfasts without schedules, small conversations without pretense. When Julian worked late, Lena left a cup of coffee beside his desk. When she returned from the hospital, he would ask how her patients were doing even if he barely understood the medical terms. One evening, Lena came home to find Julian and Noah sitting on the floor surrounded by building blocks. The boy was laughing, his tiny hands guiding Julian's much larger ones as they built a crooked tower. "Higher," Noah said, grinning. "It will fall," Julian replied. "It is okay," Noah said. "We can build again." Julian looked at the child and smiled. "You're right." From the doorway, Lena watched them, 2 worlds she never imagined colliding, now quietly fitting together. The following weekend, they attended a charity dinner for children's hospitals. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers and gold-trimmed glasses. But midway through the evening, something unexpected happened. One of the guests, a shareholder's daughter, approached Julian, placing her hand lightly on his arm. "Julian, you have been hiding your wife from us too long," she teased. "Everyone said you would never settle down. How did she manage to change you?" Julian's answer came without hesitation. "She reminded me what love looks like when it is not for sale." The woman laughed politely and walked away, but Lena stood frozen, her heart thudding at the words. Later that night, when they returned home, Julian poured 2 glasses of wine and handed one to her. "You handled that evening well," he said. Lena shook her head with a small smile. "You mean I survived it?" Julian leaned on the balcony railing, looking over the glittering skyline. "You know, sometimes I think this marriage stopped being an act the moment you step into my world." Lena's hand tightened around her glass. "Do not say things you do not mean, Julian." He turned to her, his expression unreadable but gentle. "I mean every word. You have changed this house, this life, everything." For a moment, silence filled the air. The city below pulsed with light, and the wind carried the faint sound of sirens and laughter. Julian and Lena said quietly, "We both know how this ends." 6 months, that was the deal. He nodded, but did not look away. Maybe some deals deserved to be broken. Her heart skipped, the distance between them shrank, yet neither dared to close it completely. That night, as she lay awake, Lena could not stop replaying his words. For the first time, she feared not the end of the contract, but what would happen if the contract no longer ended at all. In the dark, Julian sat in his study, unable to focus on the documents before him. He looked at a framed photo from the gala, Lena smiling beside him, Noah holding his hand. It was supposed to be for the cameras, but now it looked painfully real. He whispered to himself, I made this deal to win a custody case, but somehow I am the one who got captured. Neither of them knew it yet, but the story was already turning. What began as a contract built on necessity was quietly becoming something neither of them could control, something dangerously close to love. Autumn arrived early that year, brushing New York in copper and gold. The Ward penthouse no longer felt like a museum. It felt lived in. Laughter sometimes echoed through the halls, now Noah's voice bright and unguarded, followed by the sound of Julian pretending not to laugh. But under that calm surface, both Julian and Lena knew the contract clock was still ticking. The court hearing for the custody case was only a few weeks away. Their 6-month marriage would end soon after, and neither dared to speak of it. One Sunday afternoon, Lena found Julian sitting on the terrace, watching the city fade into dusk. His suit jacket was off, his tie loosened. He looked less like the CEO of Ward Holdings and more like a man trying to remember who he had been before. Power hardened him. You missed dinner, she said gently. I was not hungry, he replied. The lawyers called. They think the judge will rule in our favor. That is good news. Julian nodded but did not smile. It should be. Lena joined him, wrapping her sweater tighter against the chill. You have done everything right, Julian. You will win custody. He turned to her, eyes tired. And then what? You and Noah go back to your old life, and I go back to pretending that mine's enough. Lena hesitated. That was always the plan. He let out a quiet laugh that sounded almost broken. Plans are easy when they do not involve feelings. Silence stretched between them, filled only by the hum of the city below. Then Julian said softly, Do you ever think about that night 5 years ago? The one that changed everything for me? Lena's heartbeat stumbled. She looked down at her hands. You mean, before we met again? Julian nodded. There was a storm. I remember a woman, her face hidden, her voice soft. I never knew her name. I looked for her for years. Something about her stayed with me. Lena froze, her pulse quickening. She had always known this truth would surface one day, but not like this, not when her heart was already so unguarded. Maybe some people are not meant to be found, she said quietly. Julian studied her for a long moment. Maybe some people never really leave. Before Lena could reply, Noah came running out onto the terrace holding his toy airplane. Mr. Julian, can you help me fix it? Julian crouched down and examined the broken wing. We will fix it together, little man. Lena watched them, her throat tightening. It was too easy, too natural the way they fit together. She wondered if fate was already revealing its cruel joke one truth at a time. Later that night, Julian stood at the window after putting Noah to bed. Lena approached quietly, holding a glass of water. He really likes you, she said. Julian smiled faintly. The feeling is mutual. She set the glass down and looked at him, really looked at him. Julian, this cannot keep going like this. We need to remember what this is. He turned toward her, his voice low but certain. Lena, this is the first thing in my life that feels real. Her breath caught. She wanted to argue, but his honesty disarmed her. Before either could say more, Julian's phone buzzed on the counter. It was his lawyer. He read the message silently, then looked up, his face pale. What is it? She asked. The court moved up the hearing. It is tomorrow morning. Lena's heart dropped. Tomorrow, the day everything would end. The next morning, cameras lined the courthouse steps again. Julian and Lena arrived hand in hand, the picture of unity. Inside, the judge reviewed the documents, the photos, the testimony. Everything pointed to victory. When the session ended, Julian won full custody of his nephew. Applause from his team filled the room, but Julian felt only an ache in his chest. Outside reporters swarmed them. Mr. Ward, what is next for you and your wife? One shouted. Julian looked at Lena, her face calm, but her eyes shining with something like goodbye. He forced a smile for the cameras. We will see, he said simply. That night, the penthouse was silent again. The contract had achieved its purpose. The world saw them as perfect. Only they knew how false that perfection now felt. As Julian sat alone at the piano, his fingers brushed the same melody he once played for her. But now the notes trembled uncertain, like a confession left unspoken. Somewhere down the hall, Lena packed a small suitcase. Each folded shirt felt like a heartbeat she was trying to quiet. Tomorrow, she and Noah will leave. And as the city lights flickered beyond the glass, two hearts that had found each other under false pretenses braced for the truth that was finally coming. The morning after the hearing, the penthouse felt empty, even though nothing had changed. The papers were signed, the victory complete, and yet Julian Ward felt no triumph. The silence pressed against him like a verdict. He walked through the apartment past the untouched breakfast table and into Noah's room. The boys' toys were gone, the bed neatly made. On the dresser lay a folded note with Lena's handwriting. Julian, thank you for everything. You kept your promise and now I must keep mine. Please do not look for us. Lena. Julian's hand tightened around the paper. His mind filled with flashes of her smile, the sound of her laughter echoing off marble walls, the sight of her asleep beside Noah's bed. He realized he had memorized every detail without meaning to. He grabbed his coat and went to Riverside Hospital. Her co-workers said she had resigned that morning and left without a forwarding address. By evening, the sky was the color of steel. Julian sat in his car overlooking the Hudson River, the same bridge where he had driven alone 5 years ago on the night that changed everything. He remembered the storm, the woman who had appeared like a ghost, the way she had vanished before he could even ask her name. The memory hit him harder now, sharper, as if fate had drawn a circle around his life. Later that night, he found himself back in his study, poring over Noah's medical file that she had left behind. As he read, a line caught his eye: blood type O negative, father unknown. Julian froze. His heart began to race. He pulled out his own medical file from the company's insurance records, blood type O negative. The odds were rare. Too rare. He searched the dates again. Noah was 4 years old. The storm had been 5 years ago. The truth crashed over him like cold water. The woman from that night had not just been a stranger. She had been Lena. And Noah was his son. Julian sank into his chair, the weight of revelation pressing the air from his lungs. Everything she had done, the silence, the distance, the fear suddenly made sense. He whispered to the empty room, "My God, Lena, why did you not tell me?" For the first time in years, Julian Ward did not think about business or legacy. He thought only of a woman who had carried his secret and a boy who had called him Mr. Julian, with a smile that looked too much like his own. And as the city lights shimmered outside his window, Julian knew what he had to do. He would find them not as a billionaire protecting an image, but as a father trying to bring his family home. Julian did not sleep that night. When the first light of dawn touched the city, he was already in his car, driving through the streets like a man chasing time itself. He had built empires, closed billion-dollar deals, and controlled boardrooms filled with powerful men, but at that moment he could not control the panic rising inside him. He checked every hospital in Manhattan, every address connected to Lena's old records. Finally, at a small community clinic in Queens, a nurse recognized the name. "She was here yesterday," the nurse said. She left for the bus station with her son early this morning. Julian thanked her and rushed toward the station. The city blurred past him. Streetlights, bridges, traffic, none of it real anymore. Only one thought mattered. He had a son, and he had let them both slip away. When he arrived at the terminal, the crowd was already thick with travelers. He scanned every face, his chest tightening with each passing second. Then he saw her, Lena, in a gray coat, holding Noah's hand near Gate 9. The boy clutched his toy airplane. Julian called out Lena. She turned startled, eyes wide with disbelief. For a moment, the noise of the station disappeared. "Julian, what are you doing here?" she asked. He stopped in front of her, breathing hard. "You were going to leave without telling me the truth." Her shoulders tensed. There was nothing to tell. "Do not lie to me," Julian said, his voice breaking. "I know Lena. I know he is mine." Lena's eyes filled with tears. She pulled Noah close, her voice trembling. "I wanted to protect him. You have everything, Julian: money, power, attention. I did not want him to become part of your world. I did not want him to be used." Julian stepped closer, his tone softening. "You think I will ever use my own son?" She looked away. "I did not know what you would do. I could not take that risk." Julian knelt to Noah's level. "Hey, buddy," he said gently. "Do you remember when we built that tower that kept falling?" Noah nodded. "You said we can build again?" Julian smiled through the ache in his chest. "That is right. We can build again. The three of us." Lena's tears fell freely now. She wanted to believe him, but fear still clung to her like a shadow. "You do not understand," she whispered. "It is too late. The contract, the lies, the press, everything will destroy him." Julian rose and took her hands. "Then let them destroy me instead. But do not take my son away from me." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The announcement for their bus echoed through the hall. Lena looked at Noah, then back at Julian. He said quietly, "Please, Lena, let me come with you. Not as a CEO, not as a husband on paper, as a father." Her lips parted, trembling. Julian nodded, but before she could finish, Noah tugged her sleeve. "Mommy, can Mr. Julian come too?" Lena closed her eyes, the sound of her son's voice undoing every wall she had built. When she opened them again, she saw not the billionaire the world admired, but the man who had always been searching for her. And though she did not answer, her silence was enough. Rain began to fall outside the terminal, soft at first, then steady, blurring the city beyond the glass. Lena stood motionless, her suitcase at her side, her son's small hand gripping hers. Julian waited in front of her, drenched from the run through the storm, his breath still uneven. Neither of them spoke for several seconds, as if words could ruin the fragile moment hanging between them. Finally, Lena whispered, "What are you asking me to do, Julian?" He stepped closer. "I am asking you to stop running. I am asking you to let me be what I should have been from the start." Her eyes searched his face, unsure if she could believe him. "You built a life on control. How do I know this is not another decision you will regret?" Julian's voice softened. "Because for once, I am not trying to win. I am trying to make things right." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was the same silver ring he had given her on their wedding day, the ring that had once been part of a contract. Lena stared at a ring glistening on her lashes. "Julian," he held the ring between them. "That day at the courthouse, this ring meant obligation. Today, it means choice. I am not asking you to stay for 6 months. I am asking you to stay for life." Noah looked up at his mother, his voice quiet but sure. "Mommy, I want to go home with both of you." Lena's resolve broke. The fear, the guilt, the weight of secrets, all of it dissolved in that one sentence. She reached for Julian's hand, her voice trembling. "You are not the same man I met in that courtroom." Julian smiled faintly. "Neither are you. You taught me what family really means." He slipped the ring onto her finger again. The silver no longer felt cold. It felt alive, warm from his touch. Outside, thunder rolled across the skyline as if announcing a new beginning. The three of them stepped into the rain together, no longer billionaire and nurse, but father, mother, and child. As they walked toward the waiting car, Julian looked down at Noah, who was holding both their hands. "You know," he said, "this time we are not pretending." Noah grinned. "Then, can we build again?" Julian nodded. "Yes, buddy. We can build again." Lena leaned her head against his shoulder as they crossed the wet pavement. The city lights reflected in puddles like stars fallen to earth. Some contracts are signed for convenience, others are signed for survival. But the rarest ones, the ones that change everything, are written not in ink but in love. And with that, the story of Julian Ward and Lena Brooks closed, where it truly began not with a deal but with a promise kept in the rain.